Hello, everyone. We'll give it a couple of minutes as people join in, and then we'll get started. So we see a few people trickling in, and I think we should get started. Ronak?
Yeah.
Are you letting people in?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Shoma Bakri, part of Vidya Bangalore. And I welcome all of you to join us in another interesting session of Vidya's Knowledge Series. It's a panel discussion that we are very excited to plunge into today. As the pandemic hit, I think all of us had to change the way we've been working. And educational institutions, NGOs, corporates, everybody had to shift paradigms in terms of how we were used to working, and Vidya's no exception. Internally, when we have been talking, we have been saying that it's been almost a boon. The COVID, if you were to look at it from the glasses half full side, because it forced us to adopt technology to run the way we do things. And one of the things that we realized is that technology adoption now is a must, not only to survive things like COVID, but also because if we dream to become bigger, if we dream to increase our footprint, if we dream to change, the world and scale through our programs, we do not have an option but to embrace technology and adopt it, because that is the only way that perhaps we can get rid of our constraints that come from sitting within a brick and mortar operation. There are only so many centers you can open. There are only so many physical interactions that you can have. And then you are constrained by location, time, venue, funds to create infrastructure. But the minute we saw that we were able to embark on using technology to reach out to people to continue our classes, we saw that the potential is huge. It's not that we didn't know about it, but there was no compulsion to do it. So I think everybody had inertia. And, now we have realized that in order to take Vidya forward to our vision of growth and scale to make the kind of change that we want to in educating, empowering, and transforming lives of the people that we work with, we do not have a choice but to embrace and adopt technology with a vengeance. So what we are talking about is reimagining Vidya, reimagining the way we do things. And that's going to be the topic of discussion today. So we are about 36 years old now, and we have 79 projects. We work across the 4 metros, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune. Over 4 lakh individuals have been touched by us, children, youth, women. We've made a difference to the lives of thousands of families who have been empowered to, rise above the cycle of poverty. Our children who would otherwise not have had any future in the slums that they were born and grew in, are now, studying in the best of institutions across India and are working abroad. So for us, those are case studies alone, and we need to replicate that for lakhs and lakhs of people. So what we really, really want to do is take what we do, 37 years of great methodology, great pedagogy that we have developed and approaches that have worked. We now want to use technology to proliferate, rural India. We would like to go into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. We're already in the tier 1 cities, and try to share what we are able to do, the best practices that we have put in place in collaboration with partners across the country to be able to affect, many, many, many more lives. We are good at what we do, but we don't want to limit ourselves to the physical constraints that we have been subjected to pre-pandemic. So that's where we are today. We are going to have some very, very interesting discussion moderated by Mr. Dinesh Kumar Singh. And then we have a panel of eminent educationists and technologists and people who worked in the social sector who are going to help us navigate this route of reimagination that we're talking about. And the people that are on the panel have years of experience, and they can share their insights with us. We are dreaming of an India where every child has the opportunity to be someone, be something, achieve their dreams. Every woman is economically independent. The literacy rate goes up, the poverty index goes down. I mean, we want to be a part of that journey. Vidya wants to be a part of that journey. So today I welcome all of you to listen to our eminent speakers, Dr. Leena Wadia, who is Senior Fellow, Observer Research Foundation, Professor Sridhar Iyer, Department of Education Technology, IIT Mumbai, Ms. Sudipta Banerjee, co-founder of Race to Pi, Mr. Nav Ishalai, Director, ArcMind Consultancy, and Mr. Arjun Agarwal, founder of On-Term Education. Welcome all our esteemed panelists. Mr. Dinesh, excuse me, Mr. Dinesh Singh is going to be introducing all our panelists in a minute. I would like to introduce Dinesh Kumar Singh. He's been an integral part of Vidya for the last 3 years. He's been volunteering with us in our technology efforts in Mumbai, and he is part of the TCS Digital Farming Initiative in TCS Research and Innovation. He's currently leading the social innovation for the masses, and he does a lot of things which are very aligned to what we're trying to do. So it's all about reimagination. It is all about trying to use technology to scale efforts, not only of Vidya, but overall in all the efforts that India is making to make things better for all sectors that are left behind or who need the push to be able to get above the constraints that keep holding them back and, hold them in the cycle of poverty and illiteracy and health, and all of that we are backward in. Mr. Dinesh Kumar, he is a member of IEEE, and he's on the Educational Activities Board of EAB. He is also on the Research and Curriculum Advisory Board of several colleges. such as Nirma Institutes. He is an active participant of TCS Academic Industry Interaction Program and has conducted many sessions for students and faculties in the last 5 years. He has authored and published more than 50 national and international papers. He has co-authored a book and has 3 patents. He is volunteering with Vidya for the last 3 years through the Tata Sustainability Volunteering Initiative named Tata Pro Engage, and mentoring the leadership team of Vidya working on digital transformation at Vidya. So welcome Dinesh ji, and welcome all our panelists, welcome audience. I will now hand over to Dinesh ji to please take this conversation forward, and I'm very excited to listen to everybody speak on this particular topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that kicking up the session. I'll begin with the introduction of my eminent panelist. We are privileged to have Dr. Leena Wadia. She is a senior fellow at the Observation Research Foundation. She is also professor and head of vocational educational program at University of Transdisciplinary Health Science and Technology, Bangalore. And her prime work has been advisory to NHDC. She has contributed to the preparation of Draft National Education Policy 2019, both as a part of the Kasturirangan Search Committee as well as a member of drafting committee of the policy. So welcome Leena ji to the panel discussion today.
Thank you.
Next we have our beloved professor Dr. Sridhar Iyer. He is the head of the Educational Technology Program, Center for Distance Engineering Education, and also a principal investigator of National Program of Technology Enhanced Learning and NPTEL. In fact, NPTEL has become a very popular name amongst the practitioner and engineer across the country. He has been behind few digital initiatives such as Project Oscar, and we will love to hear from him and how relevant that is to today's discussion, which is interactive visualization database for school and higher education, and of course also bringing Masti to computer world, a series of books for teaching learning computer in school. So welcome Sridhar ji for today's discussion.
Thank you.
Joining the panel we have Mr. Nav Kishle. He is a founder and director of Archmite Consulting Private Limited, and as the name suggests, it's all about the mind. He has over 16 years of core learning and development experience, developing strategy for entire learning cycle. He is an experienced CSR evangelist and have been a guiding force for the non-profit towards donor connect, proposal writing, expectation mapping, and so on. Welcome Navji for today's session.
Thank you.
We have Sudipta Banerjee. She is an entrepreneur, public relational professional, a Kathak dancer, and a youth mentor. For 20 years, she has mentored 100+ youth globally, and she has scaled Shikshana's Girl Empowerment Program to state of Karnataka for 3,000+ girls. Currently, she is a co-founder at Race to Pi, which prepares students to get future ready in this ever-changing world. And definitely COVID proved that change is the only thing which is constant. You cannot predict it, it is going to be there. So your experience will be very powerful today, Sudipta. Welcome to the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Next is our young entrepreneur, Arjun Agrawal. He is the CEO of Cinerama, which is driving business units in home automation, smart devices, and AV system. He is a co-founder of Ontam Education Private Limited, an EdTech company that is helping to create inclusive, equitable learning space for the children. The mission of Ontam is to make teaching an aspirational professional again. That is where the education, technology, and employment all come together. Welcome Arjun to this powerful panel discussion.
Thank you, Dinesh.
Thank you. So without wasting any time, let's get into the session. The session has been divided into make it like a concrete takeaway from the panel discussion around 3 core questions. The question number 1 is about what is the reimagination? Because it has become a buzzword, everybody is talking about it, but what exactly is it? It is only technology or is it something beyond that? I request my panel's point, I'll go across the table starting with Leena ji and Professor Sridhar and so on to give their thoughts for next 2 minutes. each.
Thank you, Dinesh, very much. So I'll go first, and I will speak from the perspective of the National Education Policy, which I had the privilege of participating in creating. The word reimagination has a connotation of not just change, but a big change, a pivot of some kind. And the National Education Policy has tried to do exactly that. We are trying to bring the focus back on individual children, on developing their individual capacities, their talents, based on their talents, their aspirations, their abilities, and so on. And for that, I mean, there are many things that the policy has provided, which I can see many things Vidya is already doing. For example, we also want the students not just to get subject knowledge, but to develop their personalities and to develop 21st century skills, not just problem solving and critical thinking, which everybody talks about, but also personality characteristics like persistence and grit, the ability to deal with failures and negotiation, empathy within society, and so on. We are also trying to make the change from just to learning how to learn and to become lifelong learners, because as we have seen in the last few decades, the change is so fast, kids need to do that. And of course, to pivot from, the kind of rote learning that was getting forced on our exams, through our exams, to asking, not asking what do you know, but asking what can you do with what you know. So these are the things that the policy is trying to do. So I'd love to hear from all the other panelists. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Good. So over to Professor Sridhar.
So thank you, Leena. And she has actually said most of what I was planning to say for this point. So I also agree with all of that, what she has said. I think the one thing that I would like to emphasize here is that when we are reimagining, we should now focus on what is really essential in the new situation for the new learners. Instead of trying to go back to business as usual with our curriculum and rote learning, etc., I think now we should be trying to emphasize a little more on equipping students with meaningful skills. And many of them Leena has already mentioned. So it's also necessary now for us to come up with metrics on how to measure these skills and how they are growing. So that's what I would like to add to what she said. That's all. Thank you.
Very good. Now.
Thank you, Dinesh, and good afternoon to everyone, all the panelists over here. I come from L&D background, and I would like to focus on the reimagination overall. If I talk about from the perspective of an organization, from the perspective of an individual, and also from the perspective of development sector. So before imagination, every process revolves. There is some kind of resilience, there is a return, and then we have reimagination, and then it leads to reformation. So that's the most important aspect of reimagination, that why are we doing it? So it basically, we look for some kind of reformation in the current set of processes and the practices that we have, whether it is with respect to learning, whether it is with respect to education, or also with respect to the operations of various organizations, whether it is the corporate sector or the NGO sector. There are 4 specific things I would like to focus upon under reimagination. We need to rapidly recover. We need to rebuild our operations. We need to rethink about the organization, who we are, how to grow, how we work. And along with that, the last and the most important thing, which also is the topic of today, is accelerated digital adoption to enable the reimagination. So yeah, that's it from my end.
Good. Very good. Very good. Sudipta, what about you? What is reimagination as per you?
Thanks, Dinesh. It's a wonderful question. So I will talk from the perspective of Board of Advisory and Advisory Board member of Sectiona. What I've seen is that for me and for the team there, reimagination is identifying a problem, seeing what the solutions are already existing, figure out what's not working, where the gaps are, and then find a solution to that gap and bridge the gap. For example, like COVID has shown us that India can be pretty much divided into 2 segments. One is students who have access to digital devices and one who don't. And I'm talking about the one who don't hear, because the students who had access still learned something, but the people who suffered were the students who did not have. So how can you reimagine a solution here where we can, in a very cost-effective and scalable way, reach to the last child in the system, right? And I think as a country, we really need to put all our brains together, thoughts together, and work towards reimagining this solution. So for me, this is reimagination. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Good, very good, very good. Arjun, we would like to hear your views also.
Thanks, Dinesh. And apologies in advance. I have a tendency to talk a lot, so please cut me off if it's going too long. Because the questions are great. And when we were looking at reimagining, we looked at it from two perspectives. One is technology and the other is teaching, because that's what we do. We work with teachers. And Ontim is new. It's a year old. Meghshala, which has been working with government schools, it's been around for about 6 or 7 years. And we've always been driven by technology. And I think the way we put it is, in EdTech, the tech comes after the ed. So when we reimagine solutions with technology, the way we think of it is, we cannot use technology for technology's sake. Right? Our goal is to deliver education, is to transform classrooms, and technology is an enabler. So every time we reimagine solutions, we think of the end goal and then apply technology where relevant. The second thing that has been critical for us for growing is, when we look at our mission, which is delivering education through technology, it's important to build a team as part of our organization that believes in that. So when we hire people to work on our software and on our tech, we look for people who believe in our core mission, who believe in delivering education scalably to classrooms and schools and students who need it, and who believe technology is the right way to do it, rather than just getting people who are great software engineers who haven't bought into the mission. Because I think keeping that goal in mind is critical when building out capacity internally. And the third thing, which is not to do with technology, but has to do with our mission, and which is why we started, was how do we reimagine classrooms? Because one stat that always stuck with us is, there are 600 million students in schools today. Out of that, 400 million students don't reach the proficiency we need. So we need to reimagine classrooms. And where we work, which is teachers, is how do we get teachers to reimagine the way they teach? Because it's hard to break habits. It's hard to get away from this elastic that makes people teach the way they were taught and makes people teach the way they've always been teaching, for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But we have to do it, because in our mind, as Sudhita said, to make the solution scalable, to get to every student who doesn't have devices, schools are the answer, because kids are in schools. And we need to reimagine classrooms. So for us, that's the 3 ways we think about reimagining.
Good, very good. I think that was a very diverse views, but one thing which is summing up is that reimagination is not alone about the technology. I think all of you spoke about it is more to do with the capacity, talent, personality, evolving resilience, identifying the problem, gap analysis, metrics, measurement. And as a last, you said that in EdTech, tech comes later, education comes first. And I think that is where the focus probably required is that reimagination is about reimagination is everything. Great. With that, moving to the next round of our today's discussion. And that is the next question to all the panelists, going in the same order. Now, once you have talked about the reimagination, so it is very clear that what is reimagination. Now, I want specific examples from each one of you, the activities where you are personally involved and you have a first-hand experience, which I would like you to share to the audiences. So we'll again start with Dr. Leena ji.
Thank you, Dinesh. I'm wondering if I'm having unfair advantage of going first every time, but this is a personal question. So let me just address, it is about my involvement. So when we were working on the national education policy, I realized with enormous shock that, only about 3% of our labor force has formal vocational educational training. That's not enough to run an economy, and there are lots of other ways of training families. The weaver's son learns how to weave from his father, and so on, hereditary and family and on-the-job training and so on. But I think in today's knowledge economy, the training, formal training is very, very important. So I got very, very interested in vocational education and have been trying to specialize in it ever since. So I'll mention two things that I'm doing that are relevant to this discussion. One of them is that, as you all know, the state governments and the NCERT are trying to prepare curriculum position papers and curriculum framework, and eventually curriculum and textbooks based on the new education policy. So I'm leading the effort from Karnataka on vocational education, and I'm also a member of the vocational education team at the national level, which is led by Manish Sabarwal of TeamLease Systems. The other thing I'm doing at the university, at the Transdisciplinary University here in Bangalore, is running Bachelor of Vocation programs. And this is very interesting and worth learning. The model we are using is to do full-time apprenticeship-based training. So the students work 5 days a week at various companies and then take classes in the evenings or on the weekends. This model was tried at TIS and was very successful. And so we are trying to replicate it in Karnataka. It's also a strategic decision because it turns out that FICCI and CII had assessed that there were at least 3 million apprenticeships available in India, and we are using only about 300,000 of them. So we are hoping to mop up some of those. So we're running courses like Bachelor of Vocation in Medical Lab Technology, which are people who do all our blood work when we need blood tests. A Bachelor of Vocation in Medical Imaging Technology. These are people who do our ultrasounds and MRIs and CT scans and so on. That's in healthcare, and many others in electronics, manufacturing, automotive, maintenance, and various things like that. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Wow, I mean, those numbers were amazing. I never realized that so much of opportunity is available. Great, great to share that. Sridhar, I would like to hear from you, like how you are reimagining the work you are doing.
Yeah. So one of the things is that what we are seeing is today there is more acceptance of technology. So for example, use of simulations and use of AR, VR in education is increasing. So taking off with what Arjun said earlier about ed before the tech. So we also have one mantra in our department, which is basically saying that strong pedagogy and simple technology actually trumps sophisticated technology and rudimentary pedagogy. So we do a lot of research on the pedagogical aspect. For example, we say that, okay, look, people are talking about VR environments. Where does it really make sense to use these VR environments? So one of the projects, for example, that we have done is to use VR for improving teachers' presentation skills, so that they are able to, see a virtual classroom and different students are behaving differently. And in that environment, how do they deal with it? So we do a lot of such projects, chemistry simulations, etc. And that is one aspect of what is the content that we create. The other thing that we have also seen now is that there is more acceptance of what are called active learning strategies, where the student is not just simply listening or simply watching a demo. So we've also come up with mechanisms for incorporating active learning with technology. For example, when you're showing a demo in a classroom, instead of simply showing the demo, it is always useful to pause the demo at some point, ask the students to predict what the next step is going to be, and then continue. It's a very simple technique, and this is something which has been shown to be highly effective. So we run a lot of teacher training programs. So we also have numbers, I think, of the order of 100,000 teachers who have been trained in use of technology through various courses. We have an IIT Bombay X platform, and then we have courses on NPTEL and so on. So through that, both college teachers and school teachers, we've been engaging with to use technology meaningfully in their classrooms. That's it from my side for now.
Good, very good. Just trying to understand that will the gamification also play a role in that kind of a thing? And is there anything happening on that?
So there's a lot of work which has happened in gamification. So gamification is different from game-based learning. So game-based learning is where you actually use a game, play a game in order to learn something. Gamification is where you take the system and you incorporate some aspects of game elements, where you say that, okay, you will have points, you will have leaderboards, and so on and so forth. So while gamification has its benefits, it is, though there is still research going on identifying exactly where these benefits are. So definitely it has benefits in attracting students to the topic. Does it have benefits in actual learning outcomes is still not yet very clear either way.
Okay, thank you for that add-on. So we'll move to then now to understand like what are the activities he's doing related to reimagination of the sector.
Yeah, thank you, Dinesh. So I would actually combine my experiences both in L&D as well as CSR, corporate social responsibility, as a capacity development professional and as well as a consultant. Now, I'll start with my journey with respect to what we are doing in the at the school level as well as the college and the university level. I run a program which is called Corporate Theatre, which is basically conducting a session for the students using theater and music for their understanding. And of course, we are using technology because in the last 2 years, we have been doing it online and using the various platforms. We have Google Classrooms, we have Zoom, we have Google Meet, and other tools that we have been using. Of course, I would agree to this fact that the simulation of the minds is very, very important. And we have also introduced something called breakout rooms. There are offline breakout rooms which we have been conducting, but then we came up with the online version through breakout rooms, which is here in Koramangala with one of my partners. We are running the breakout rooms in Koramangala, and we use a lot of experiential learning techniques, specifically following the Kolb's theory, where we have experiential learning. We give concrete experience followed by reflective observation, and then having a theory, abstract theory, coming up with a theory concept, and then finally active experimentation. That is a cycle we try to follow in our sessions. And for evaluation, we use a Kirkpatrick model where we have L1, which is basically the response of the participants within the training program or the sessions that we conduct within with respect to the entire experience. Then the learning of the participants before and after the program, which is also known as pre and post learning of the participants. And finally, the third thing which we have started is basically capturing their change in behavior, or we call it as L3. So what is the change in behavior over a period of time, maybe 21 days post the training or 45 days post the training? And we have some mechanism like STAR response, situational, task, action, and result. So we have basically created something on Google Sheet, and there are some, we call it as Results Lab. That tool we use to record the changes within the behavior of the participants post the training, where they mention the situation they are in, what is the action they have taken, what is the task at hand, and what is the result of their action. So how much they have been able to apply the learning in their own domain. Now, this is not just restricted to corporate as well as universities and schools. We are just taking it to the corporate as well as the NGO sector as well. In the last 10 years, I have been conducting sessions for various NGOs across the globe through a platform called Change the Game Academy and Smile Foundation. And I have been interacting with more than 300 NGOs across the globe. And we are talking about fundraising, local fundraising, resource mobilization, mobilizing support, and CSR policy, what we are following in India. So there as well, we have the entire program structured in such a way that each and every participant is able to have a simulation, have an experience of what we are talking. It is not just a theoretical concept which is being told to them. Rather, it is more on experiential learning. And we use all the aids, whether it is audio visuals or the audios or the panel discussions or the reading materials, which helps us to engage the participants during the training session. And of course, the other tools that we are using are, the platforms. We ensure that we use the polls and we use the other aspects of these tools to engage the entire participant. Now, it is a tough task because with the senior audience, it is easy for them to come up. When we have a younger audience, we have to change our strategy. There, probably we use tricks like storytelling. We use tricks like methodologies like corporate theater or music, which is little, I would say, easy for them to accept and follow, in comparison to what we do with the senior participants, where we are more on the problem solving techniques like problem solution tree or rich picture or mind maps or radical candor or something of that sort. So these are few things that we have been practicing. For edu sector, there is one more thing, to measure the impact of what we are doing, or the measure the impact of what we are teaching or the learning. We use both KPI as well as balance scorecard. We have introduced a balance scorecard as well as KPI. So key performing indicators are very, very important for any training program. We have a clarity that what will indicate that the person is able to or has been able to follow or grasp what is being taught within the session. There must be key drivers, impact on the performance of the individual or the project. At a glance or at a view, we are able to see the change. Keeping the finger on the pulse of the program and the project. These indicators help us to identify the hotspots which need attention and act quickly to drive the project forward or the program forward, right? There could be multiple ways of doing this. In a nutshell, I would just say that, when we talk about balanced scorecard, it refers to strategic management and performance matrix, which is used to identify and improve various internal functions and business functions, as well as the outcomes which are basically coming out of those functions, right? And if I have to put it in the key takeaways, how do we, when we blend KPI and balanced scorecard, the key takeaways for us is that it allows us to understand the performance matrix, which is used to identify, improve, and control a business function and resulting outcomes. The concept of BSc was first introduced in 1992, basically for the for-profit organizations, but gradually it has been taken to the next level, and now it is being used in the not-for-profit sector as well, to ensure that their processes and their systems are at place, and they're robust. And these balanced scorecard involves measuring four main aspects of any business. I'm using business because it was introduced for profit, which is basically learning and growth, business processes, and the customers interaction, as well as finance. These were the four major things. Now here we kind of replace customers with the donors or the stakeholders who are involved in the not-for-profit sector. So yes, this is what we are trying to implement, both at the training level as well as the operations level in the corporate and the CSR sector. Right. That's it.
Good, very good. Yeah. So quickly, I will move to then Sudipta, like your views, your activities you are doing for this.
Sure. So for this question, I will wear my second hat, that is the co-founder of Race to Pi, what we are doing. So managing corporate relations for most of the organizations that I've worked for in the last 17 years, I've heard like all these big CEOs and CFOs telling me that, these freshers are coming with, they are so raw when they come in, there is so much learning and development cost, and they need some real world exposure before they come in. And then I asked them, okay, how many internships are you offering? And these are big CEOs and CFOs of big companies, which are global companies. And then they say, no, there is a pushback from the managers and the leaders who are actually managing the teams, and we can't really offer too many internships. So I was like, you're contradicting yourself. One way you say they need real world exposure. The other side, you tell me that you can't hire too many interns because there is a pushback. And managing youth development programs across the organizations, across the globe, I have experienced this in every country that I have worked. And this made me think that there is a huge problem there. People are cribbing, but people are not coming up with a solution. And at the end, the sufferers are youth. And this has to stop. So based on all my experience and learning, when I started Race to Pi, the thing was, how can I give more and more real world exposure to the students while they are studying, well, much before they even go for their first interview. And that's exactly where I reimagined with my co-founder, and he has a great role to play here. Chalam, we both sat and we brainstormed. He is like a corporate leader throughout his career, and I have worked with youth. So we have two different perspectives which we blended, and we came up with this entire program where we collect projects from startups and MSMEs, and these are emerging sector projects. These are projects of tomorrow, you can very much say, and we make the students work on those projects, and we tell the companies, your real problem is time. You don't have time and bandwidth, but you can pay the students. So you don't need to spend any time, any bandwidth on managing the student. We will manage the students for you, but you make sure you pay them for the work they are doing. And if you are not ready to pay them, the IP stays with them. You don't get what students work on, because you can't exploit students all their life, which they are very used to. That students work on something, IP is there, and you just take the IP without even paying them a penny. That it doesn't work that way. It has to stop. So we reimagined that solution, and right now this is what we are going to different colleges, and we are going to different companies. We are sourcing projects, and students are working on it. And this is for all students. We are not putting any barrier that it is for engineering students or MBA students. No, if you're a BBA student, BCom student, undergrad, postgrad, you have the drive, you have the desire to work on real world project, then come and do it, right? So this is what we are doing, and that's how I think I'm contributing towards reimagination. What happens, this is a very young company, 1.5-year-old, it's yet to be, figured out. We will talk about it in some time. Thank you.
Good. So you are becoming kind of a learning marketplace. So it's learning while working kind of a thing. What even Sridhar highlighted about that.
Yeah, similar to something similar. Yeah. Thank you.
So Arjun, quickly to you, like what you are doing, which you will call that it is a reimagination of the sector, maybe in few lines.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. So there's a lot of what we do, and taking off on what Professor Sridhar said and what Dr. Leena has talked about is our first job was sort of relooking at reimagining curriculum, not syllabus. And for that, we've partnered with an organization called the CGC, the Common Ground Collaborative, the founder of which is a gentleman called Kevin Bartlett, who was one of the original writers of the IBPYP. And he founded the CGC about 8 years ago to reimagine classrooms and schools, because he said the IB has sort of become stratified. Let's look at what today's world needs. And we have great tools, like we have something called the Portrait of a Learner, which Dr. Tina talked about, which is, what do we want students to come out of schools? What skills do we want? We want them to be compelling communicators. We want them to be rational problem solvers. We want them to be confident in their choices. And all of that is independent of the syllabus they learn. We take CGC's pedagogy. It's rooted in constructivism. It's rooted in inquiry, and we bring it into our classrooms, aligned to local syllabi. So we have content for the NCERT, we have content for the Northeast curriculum for the Karnataka State Board, and we sort of reimagine the way that content is taught. We teach it conceptually. We took a lesson on the 1857 rebellion and looked at it through a conceptual lens, right? You can teach the content. Let's look at why rebellions happen. Let's look at how you judge the outcomes of a rebellion, and let's teach those concepts and answer those questions by looking at a local example. And that's sort of how we're taking the existing syllabus and reimagining the way teaching happens. The second part is technology, which I've already touched on, and we have a clear focus. We believe the best education happens in classrooms through activities and not through passive consumption. This is what what Professor Sridhar talked about. To take an example, some of our lessons have videos in them, but right after the video, it's a 1 minute or 2 minute video, we have a discussion. And our lessons are constructed in a way that we have slides in the lessons that teach the teacher how to run the discussion. So we show a video, we then have 2 slides of training that tell the teacher, after this video, ask these questions, expect these answers, and here's how you facilitate a discussion. So that's how we train teachers. We give them the tools, we tell them how to teach, and then we let teachers explore that in classrooms. A key area of technology for us is, to a point Sudipta raised, is how do you get access to all of this in areas that don't have internet? And we've worked very hard to make all our content available offline without internet, to a point where we can ship a phone that has our content preloaded to an area that has no internet, and teachers can, or limited internet, and teachers can access our content through micro Wi-Fi local networks from phone to phone. So they don't need internet to download all our lessons. And our lessons, the bank is about 40 GB. So we use technology in ways to make our content accessible. But at the same time, we're always clear that technology does not replace classrooms, it augments them. The last part of what we're trying to do is reimagining technology for collaboration. And we do this internally. All our teachers, as part of On2 and Mekshala, we use Google Slides, we use Google Docs for collaboration. But we see international applicability in what we do. So, we've had talks with various organizations in countries in Africa that face similar challenges to us, very similar challenges. Lack of trained teachers, lack of internet. All they have is a different syllabus. So we are building tools to let teachers in those countries take our base plate content, contextualize it, localize it, and create content relevant for that region. And the same is true in India also. The best content creators may be sitting in remote areas. We want to give them tools to take our base plate content, modify it, localize it, and then use that to feed back into our community and take learnings from all over. So, and that of course has a component of digital literacy. It has building technology to enable a collaboration. And that's sort of how we are reimagining content creation and collaboration across an international community of teachers.
Good, very good. And I think that brings to my next question, because you beautifully kind of tied between what Dr. Leena and Sridhar and Sudipta said. Like, if you have to give maybe only 2 takeaways for Vidya, when I say Vidya as an example for all other non-profit. So this question is for each of my panelists, but then specifically starting with you, Arjun, on the same topic. What exactly will be very specific actionable item or the takeaway for Vidya?
So I think our 2 biggest learnings have been, and I may be rehashing them, is be clear about what we're using technology for. Be clear about the goal. We don't do that perfectly, but we strive hard to do that. And the second is building in a culture in-house of technology adoption, because we've had people join us who haven't been comfortable with Google Slides and Google Docs, but we make efforts to train them, because we say we expect our end users to use technology. We can't say that we can't hire people who don't know technology, right? So bringing that culture into everything we do internally, and also hiring people who believe in the mission, hiring people who believe technology is key, but who also believe technology cannot be used just for technology's sake. So I think those are 2 takeaways.
So going quickly in the reverse order. So Sudipta, like, what exactly will be 2 action or takeaway you will give to Vidya?
So I would say Vidya here means all the other NGOs, not particularly Vidya. I would say identify first really well what your target audience needs in this post-COVID world. Needs have changed significantly after COVID, and then reimagine a solution through technology. Because yes, we can't come up with any scalable solution without tech. That's very important. But I see a lot of people blabbering technology without even knowing, building on what Arjun just said, without even knowing why they need it and what they're using it for. So that is one thing. Please focus on the target audience need. And the second thing is the NGOs who are working with students, definitely students who have access to technology, it is easier for them to give them real world exposure. So can they start early? Can you start giving them real world exposure earlier in life? Because the earlier they get, the better it is, right? So that would be my second thing for them to think of. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. So moving over to then Sridhar, what would be your takeaway for such non-for-profit?
Okay. So my first takeaway is don't reinvent the wheel. So I have seen lots of NGOs working on similar problems and starting from scratch again and again. So there are a lot of open educational resources available, and mostly what we need to do is to adapt them and contextualize them and not recreate them. So that is one takeaway. The second one that I have seen with a lot of NGOs as well as even companies is that people jump into education with informal ideas of what is education. And because we've all been in school, we think we know how to run a school. So that's really not a great way of doing things. So there is a little bit of formal learning about what is education technology, what are these strategies, what is meaningful, what can work. That can actually help a lot in designing meaningful programs and achieving quantifiable outcomes.
Good, very good, very good. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Leena. Same question. What will you give today? Or you are on mute.
Sorry. Thank you very much. So again, I will speak from the perspective of the National Education Policy. When we wrote the school section, it was clear that there were 3 non-negotiables. One is that we have to pay more attention to early childhood care and education. 2 is to ensure foundational literacy and numeracy. And 3 is to stem dropouts. And I was very delighted when I spent time on the Vidya website to find that Vidya is engaged in many things already. So for them, takeaway is many small tweaks. I'll give you an example. They are already engaged with students, youth who are out of school and who are trying to complete their education. And the NEP says that 55% of male students drop out because of economic reasons. We can't solve their economic problems. So they will have to go and work. So therefore, we will have to find ways to help them complete their education outside through NIOS. So Vidya is an accredited institution of NIOS. In fact, I'd like to learn about their experience and so on. So this is very, very important that we have to find ways around, because the NEP says that every child must remain in school till 12th grade because it's needed for the knowledge economy and for lifelong learning. And the other thing that the NEP has tried to do is to encourage educational institutions to engage with NGOs and with the community. And this gives NGOs a very important opportunity to contribute. For example, children learn languages very quickly when they are before the age of 10. Their brains are completely plastic. They can learn as many languages as possible. But the way they learn languages is transactional. They learn it by talking to adults and to their classmates. So thousands of schools in India have only one teacher. There is no way that one teacher can teach a child 3 languages. We want multilingual ability in our young kids very early, before the age of 10. If Vidya and other NGOs can engage in this process and have volunteers show up in school and talk to the kids in different languages, that will help a lot also. But that's just a small example, but there are many examples of community engagement. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, anything quickly, 30 seconds.
So I think just 2 things. I would just focus on 2 aspects which I talked about. One is monitoring and the other is communicating. So if the NGOs and Vidya can actually focus on how do we monitor and what are the different ways. I already talked about balance scorecard and KPI. And the last thing is communicating through storytelling their story of success to reach out to maximum number of people. Probably that is one aspect. I'm sure that Vidya is also already doing it. But yeah, just scaling it up to the next level.
Good, very good. Thank you. So in the interest of time, quickly moving to few of the audience question which has come up. And since Arjun has to leave fast, Arjun, I will like you to maybe answer the last question, which is about like education with help of smart learning has become extremely easy and accessible to learn the concept, but how NGO can provide the platform for the marginalized communities for better impact. Quick, maybe a minute to answer on that.
So two immediate responses. The first would be that smart learning has become easy and accessible, but I think it's hard to tell what is really useful, right? And it's all points we've talked about. There's plenty of content available. Is it the best way for effective learning, especially for the time we're in? Maybe or maybe not. And this is, and I think there are plenty of edtech firms who push this, and it's not necessarily a vision we believe in. The second point, which is marginalized communities, the reason we decided to work through schools is something Sudhir mentioned early on, is scale. Because how do we reach the maximum number of students with the limited resources we have? We said it is to work through teachers and work through schools where kids are, where you don't rely on students having devices. And that's been a core tenet for us. Whatever we build again, we assume our students who are our end impactees don't have devices. And if it's stuff for students like workbooks, it has to be physical. If it's for use in classrooms, then it can be on a smartphone. So that's how we design our solution to impact marginalized communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to the next question. I'll share the screen. So going to the first question, to Dr. Leena Wadia, if you can take on what significant aspect do NEP policy cover, especially related to the digital transformation, and how impactful is this?
So thank you for that question. I didn't mention technology at all in my inputs to Vidya. Technology for the last child is very, very difficult without government involvement also. I just wanted to put that out there. When we were writing the NEP, we were very clear that we cannot be prescriptive about technology solutions. So we have been very, very careful. Many people commented on the fact that we didn't say much. What we said is that we should have a national education technology forum that evaluates technology solutions on a continuous basis and makes recommendations to governments and to institutions on using them. Certainly state governments have to be involved. For example, in Karnataka, only 31% of students have reasonable tech access. If government has to provide the rest in schools, then we need governments to get the right advice of what kind of technology to put there. So, technology, there are 4 broad areas in schools. There is teaching and learning, of course. There is teacher initial preparation and professional development. There is increasing access for not disadvantaged kids, but children with disabilities. And the last thing is of planning and administration and so on. So, what has happened now is that the government has understood, and the general suggestion we made to create the NETF. So the NETF is in the works. We should hear about it in the next few months. But they are also thinking about a national digital education architecture, which they say will do to education what UPI did to finance. We will also wait to hear the unveiling of that thing. So when these two come together, there could be lots of impact, but we have to wait for it to come, actually. I
think it's very valid. I think you are right that the way we are talking first, reimagination of the process and then technology. Yeah. Here also, I think the same approach what government has taken. Yes. Thanks for that insight. Moving to the next question.
Sorry, if I can just jump. I need to jump off.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Arjun, for joining this.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to all the other panelists. It's been a great experience for me. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So moving to the next question, the pandemic triggered a rapid transformation in the field of communication and everything became digital. but there are students and few communities we still do not get the desired service. So how do we can achieve this? So that could be question to Sridhar, you.
Okay. So what I think is this should be tackled in two ways. So one is the last mile connectivity issue, which is what I think probably the question is talking about, that the service is not reaching or there is not enough resources at the last mile. Okay, so that is something which the government has been aware of for more than a decade and people are working on, and that is a process that will continue and they have to do. But that's not something which an individual NGO can really tackle, right? So what can an individual NGO tackle to address this issue? So if you ask that question, then what you see is that we don't want a one-size-fits-all solution. So just because there is this digital thing available in some other urban area does not mean that the same digital thing makes sense in the rural area. So what is important is to look at what is there in the context, what is the skills that are required to be developed for that context, and come up with programs which make sense for them. So that is a totally different way of tackling this problem.
Okay.
So that's what I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving to next question, education sector NGOs are playing crucial role in raising awareness or adopting the digital change or transformation. But is that enough? What may be the productive and the viable ways to maximize this impact? Sudipta, that question for you.
This is a very interesting question. So, yeah, means what I would say, no, awareness alone won't be enough for beneficiary impact. In fact, what I would say is that COVID has given us enough awareness about the digital divide. All sane citizens of India can see the impact of digital divide on education and can feel the pain. So awareness is, I don't think the problem now. The problem now is that implementation. We need to start implementing and bridging the gap. And before we start implementation, we need to sit, reimagine a solution, a plan of what we are going to implement. How are we going to reach to the last mile? It's wrong to completely depend on the government. The government alone can't do that. So how do we come up with that plan? That would need a lot of collaboration. Collaboration between different NGOs working in the same space. I also agree with Professor Sridhar that so many people are reinventing the wheel. Why can't you see what the other person is doing? Collaborate. Take that same program, implement it in a different location if you have the fund, right? So that needs to be done. That is one, that NGOs in the education sector need to come together under one umbrella and start reimagining a solution. And it is not impossible. I can see that happening in Karnataka with education department's guidance. And then create lot of PPPs. Okay, like this public-private partnership is the way to go to solve this problem. But PPP will not be useful unless we know what we want to do. And to figure out what we want to do, that will need a lot of time. That's where the crux of this problem lies. How do we make sure that people are collaborating and reimagining and coming up with an implementation plan? So I would say people should start thinking on that. Thanks.
Okay, good, very good. So I think the partnership is the key, and that brings to the next question. Now, quickly, any thoughts on how to bring digital transformation in the rural and the remote school?
Yeah, so taking further from what Sudipta mentioned, public-private partnership, that is an important model which needs to be implemented here. There is another thing which we have been seeing emerging in other parts of the world. Impact bonds or impact investments are also one way of collaborating. So, here the role of the government is to, give us those government organizations or institutions, the rural sector or the rural portion of India. And then the corporate can come and they can give the technology and they can actually provide the operations because they are good in terms of, upgrading the infrastructure as well as creating changes with respect to the processes and systems, right? And then involvement of the community, the local civil society, through an NGO or probably through the local panchayat, if we can actually involve them in terms of operations, conducting the day-to-day activity of the school, of the organization, then probably yes, we can see the transformation with respect to the digital transformation that we are looking forward to. In fact, one of I know an individual, Mr. Abhishek Ranjan from Brilio, he was once mentioning that he went to Gujarat and he saw a model over there where this model is being practiced in the government schools, where the government takes care of some portion of the funds. The corporate comes and they provide both fund as well as the operational, I would say the competency. And then we have the common people and the civil society, which is taking care of the activities and the day-to-day activities of the organization. So, and we need to build, we need to operate, and we need to transform, and we need to hand it over to the community over a period of time. So that's what is the idea that can be utilized.
Thanks now for that one. So there are a few more questions, but what I'll do, I'll just write to all of you and seek your input on that in the interest of time. And I would like to then summarize today's discussion. We actually started with the cracking the word reimagination, and I'm very happy to say that all of you concurred on the word that reimagination is not only introduction of the technology, and then learning for the day for me was that in EdTech, tech come later and education comes first. So that was a very important aspect, that education, the focus has to be on education process, focus has to understand that what is today and what is the desired state, what is the gap between those two. And then we have to go for that process part of the reimagination. And again, when Dr. Lina talked about the NEP, as a like education policy, then she also mentioned about that this is exactly how NEP is evolving with NETF and then the architecture of learning, bringing technology. So focus is first that if I'm in education, I need to understand and act on the process part of that, impact part of that, reimagining that process. So I think that was one of the very good takeaway for everybody who attended this session today. And that is starting with identifying the problem, looking at what to change, what is essential. And another key part which keep coming, vibrating was that partnership. So it was a partnership among the NGOs, partnership with the government, partner with the technology companies and startup and forums, and also then how to make the learning. So first important aspect of the learning was the in-house skill development, the teachers learning, and that's where the part of the lifelong learning came in. And another interesting aspect was that technology doesn't mean create video and you are digital. As I think few of you repeatedly talked about that, it has to be interactive, and you gave example of how videos need a pause. It means technology also need a stop sign, and then interaction between teacher and student to happen. And beautiful example of that, to guess what comes next. So it means the person, the learner and the trainer both become part of the video then, or the learning then. I think that was a very good example and takeaway. Sridhar also talked about use of AR, VR for this, and beautiful example to differentiate between game-based learning versus the gamification. And now also talked about the thinking about this everything as an outcome-based, having balanced scorecard, strategic approach is not just doing that IT wing will do the digital, but top bottom entire organization coming together. And again, of course, then Sudipta highlighted about that umbrella approach where everybody coming together, And Arjun, before leaving, he said that be clear about the goal and strive hard to achieve that, and not only do it, try to do it in-house, start in-house, but then bring or hire people who believe in this mission, and then they drive it together. I think it's a beautiful bouquet of learning and takeaway from today's discussion. Any quick comment, observation from any of my panelists? Dr. Leena, Sridhar.
I think we've
Thank
said
you
enough.
for,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for the invitation, and we were happy to be part of this.
Yes, I think the umbrella part what Sudipta talked about, I think as an umbrella, we should keep contributing to make a change. Great, thank you very much. God bless you. Have a great day, and thanks for joining today. And let's remain in touch to drive this reimagination of this entire sector. Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
It was a
everyone.
pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Leena. Thank you, Sudipta. And thank you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Soma, Ronak. Thank you very much for your support. Ronak, you can conclude the session.